Dan's a project consultant for the RJC for the Gold Coast and has worked alongside us to develop the report, which we're about to present. Thanks, Dan. The Leaders of Industry Lunch, thank you very much for attending. And this is a report that we have just completed after doing the RJC for the Gold Coast. And this was about creating the jobs of today and the future, improving training pathways and driving economic activity on the Gold Coast. Today's agenda is we're going to give you a bit of an overview of Queensland and the Gold Coast, the economy in relation to jobs, and we're going to do a bit of a reflection on the past year. We'll give you an overview of who and what the RJC is on the Gold Coast, a lot about the projects and some of our key findings. Now, there is a lot of information that we will be giving today, but don't worry, because this will be uploaded onto our webpage, and our webpage will be shown at the end of this report. So, Queensland. As the Minister has announced, the unemployment rate is at an nearly 14-year low. However, our workforce is going to increase by 10.9%, which is about 124,300 people in the next 2 years. By 2025, as the Minister announced, we will have at least 280,000 more workers, and these will be predominantly in hydrogen and renewables, biomedical and creative and design. The Olympics are offering us some opportunities, and we will see high value end jobs come through the Olympics, and it should create $8.1 billion in economic benefits and at least 9,000 new jobs. And where will these jobs be? There's a lot of jobs going to be in the digital and technology skills, and it's a rapidly growing area with 126,000 workers. And 1 in 4 jobs will be in the digital and IT world by 2025. In the Queensland state economy, it's estimated by 2025, 3.6 billion will be in the renewable workforce, and these will be high-skilled jobs. So, the Gold Coast. What are the market drivers for the Gold Coast? It's certainly been the effects of the government stimulus. Our lifestyle has pulled a lot of people up here. There has been a demographic shift. People are now working from home, fly in, fly out, part-time, and of course the Great Resignation. So people who are going, I'm working, I'm going to have actually resigned. We've had a lot of resignations through the COVID period. And we're price competitive compared to the capital city markets. We have a lack of supply relative to the elevated demand, however, and we've got interest rates. But the recent migration, interstate migration, we've had 40,600 people that have left New South Wales, 17,300 that have left Victoria, and we've had 41,000 people come to Queensland. On the residential markets, our home values rose by 25%, that's nationally. Regional market growths were stronger than capital city markets, and home values firmed at a greater rate than apartments, and rents rose by at least 11.8% nationally. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Stella. Just to confirm, unemployment rate is ridiculously low at the moment. I just read this morning that in May nationally there were 500,000 empty jobs at the moment, so obviously very low and predicted to go even lower. So I thought we'd just reflect on the last year, because it's pretty easy just to keep moving forward, but with the RJC starting in July this time last year, it's been a really challenging, topsy-turvy year, quite dynamic. So this time last year we were responding to COVID restrictions, still a lot of people at home. We had borders closed, as in the Queensland borders, and we had no or limited international migration. As the borders lifted in, I think it was October or November last year, we started to see people coming back to the state. We started to get COVID, and we started to see people not being able to get to work because of COVID or because they were close contacts. And then over the last couple of months, it seems like we've had some influenza-affected staff as well. So all of this has led to, amongst other issues, worker shortages, which most people in this room can attest to, and record low unemployment. That has also been compounded by supply chain issues as a result of global issues, and as Stella pointed out, we've got low rental availability and difficulty to either rent or buy properties. So the last year's been quite dynamic. As a regional jobs committee, it's been important to be as agile as possible to respond to the changing circumstances as they've arisen, and we'll talk about that now.
A little bit of background about RJCs. As I said, it's about creating the jobs of today and the future and improving training pathways. They're funded by the Queensland Government, Department of Training, Employment and Small Business. Thank you, Minister Farmer. They were established in 2019. There are 9 Queensland RJCs. I think for us, the value of it is that the RJCs can develop their own action plans which respond to the region's needs. So what we run here on the Gold Coast will be very different to what other areas would run, because they're responding to whatever their nuances are. Our project was written up in 3 different phases. And the first phase was a mapping exercise to look at all the training and employment skill agencies that were delivering on the ground here on the Gold Coast. The second one was to do the jobs of today. So it was all around hospitality and tourism, because that was the most affected at that stage, and we had to look at what we can enact upon and what can happen and what we can utilise in order to help that sector. And the third one is about jobs of tomorrow. So working with our key sectors, and the key sectors we have here are advanced manufacturing, the Biomedical Technologies, Industry 4.0 and ICT, space, aerospace and defence, and marine. So we actually got all those entities into a round table in separate groupings, and then we sat down and asked them a lot of questions. And
that's right, a lot of people in those roundtables are here today.
Yep.
So just to give you a chronology of the last year, obviously in July we formed the Regional Jobs Committee. We then did the context analysis review, which the Minister referred to, and I'll show you that in a sec. Over Christmas we looked at hospitality, and then over the last few months we've been sitting down with industry to understand what's going on at the coalface. And here we are today at the Leaders' Lunch. Okay,
we don't do it alone, we have a committee. So we have the Gold Coast Regional Jobs Committee. This committee is made up of all those different sectors, and at every one of our tables I have a committee representative that has been working and supporting us. Could they all please take a quick stand so we can recognise you? Thank you. Big hand, thank you. These people are volunteers. They give of their time freely and have been an amazing source of advice and information.
Probably worth noting on that also is the representation has been quite strategic and represents both government at all levels, but also different sectors, as we'll discuss in a minute. So this, at the start of the process in July or August last year, the first point of call really was to understand what was going on in the sector and who's doing what and who's responsible. So we tried to define or develop the ecosystem of who's responsible, and this is what we ended up with in terms of what's going on at a federal, state level, what's the role of employers, etc. So I won't go through it, just the point is it's been a valuable exercise for the RJC in understanding who does what and who to speak to under certain circumstances.
Right. So the next stage we did was tourism and hospitality, and a bit of background. The tourism and hospitality will continue to be the mainstay of the Gold Coast economy. And this industry is it's not a surprise, has been severely impacted upon by COVID in 2021. However, in pre-COVID times, tourism accounted for over 40,000 jobs, sales approaching over 10 billion, value-add contribution to the Gold Coast economy of 5 billion, and it contributes 15% of the Gold Coast economy. It also accounts for approximately 30% of Queensland's tourism and hospitality sector. So it's safe to say that the Gold Coast visitor and hospitality sector punches well above its weight.
So it's an important sector, and when it was impacted heavily by COVID over the last couple of years due to restrictions, 1 in 3 staff will let go from the sector, which is obviously quite crippling, and nearly or over half of the tourism expenditure just dried up. But what we found is as the borders opened and as tourism came back, all of a sudden there were thousands of jobs unfilled. So the people that had been available to work in the sector were no longer there or no longer able. So what we'd found is that at the beginning of the pandemic, people, migrants and international students had left. People in the sector had sought and gone to other sectors and considered that there was more job security in other sectors as well. So as the tourism sector comes back, we'll have to look at how we can encourage people to come back to the sector and enable it to grow. Some of the things that we looked at in terms of delivering a workforce at the time were some recommendations, and these were based on a short, medium, long term, recognising that at the time it was quite a big problem for the sector, and it's something that's going to need to be responded to over time. Some of the initiatives included existing programs that have been quite successful, like the Work in Paradise program up in Cairns, which looks to attract, and we were looking to extend that to the Gold Coast. Short-term opportunities around enabling migrants to do more than 20 hours and move that to 40, which has been quite successful. And in the long term, we've had some success, well, hopefully we'll have some success in looking at potentially enabling different cohorts like mature-aged people to come back into the workforce without being penalised. And I note that the new federal government is looking at that only this week and have identified that that could have up to 400,000 people enter the workforce if that was deemed appropriate.
Okay, then we looked at the jobs of tomorrow. Dan.
Yes, sorry. In early this year, we started to look at, so if we consider things like construction and tourism to be, education to be the pillars of the city's economy traditionally, but with efforts to continue to diversify the economy and grow emerging sectors, sectors like advanced manufacturing, biomedical, Industry 4.0, ICT, space and defence and marine are critical sectors that offer enormous opportunity to diversify the city's economy. So what we did over the last few months is we sat down with leaders in those sectors, people at the coalface who are employing people every day, and as opposed to waiting for ABS data or other sources of information, we went straight to the source to say, well, and I've got the questions which I'll talk about.
Are you?
And basically the questions that we were asking people and trying to understand what are the issues now and what might be the solutions. So are you able to access staff? What are the types of worker shortfalls that you have? How many do you consider that you'll have in the medium, short and long term? And what's your strategy as an organisation or as a sector to respond to this over in the future?
And the skills requirements that they might need moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first sector was the Industry 4.0 and the ICT. RDA Gold Coast had ran two projects, and one was the Industry 4.0 Business and Investment project, I should say, and the other one was the Biomedical Supply Chain project. Under the Industry 4.0, it was identified that the Gold Coast has Industry 4.0 capability and sector-leading organisations. It's experiencing amazing rapid growth of 126 workers, and by 2025, one in four jobs, as I mentioned earlier, will be in the digital and ICT. The reason for this is COVID has fast-tracked the digital technology adoption, and conventional supply chains have also been now moved to become digital supply chains. In fact, about a month ago we ran the very first digital supply chain webinar to look at transitioning people from the traditional supply chain into a digital supply chain workforce. Skills and workforce for Industry 4.0 are a constraint, however, they also presented an opportunity for the city and its training sector, and that came out of that project and out of the workshops.
So in conversation with industry, some of the issues that were identified was a general lack of awareness of the maturity of the sector for the Gold Coast, which we think is an opportunity to respond to. Issues like people being able to live on the Gold Coast but work remotely and what we're calling the reverse brain drain. And so we're not 100% sure yet what that means from an economic development perspective, but it's definitely worth considering. And concepts around the commercialisation ideas or being able to attract capital to make these things a reality. So some of the things we're looking at is continuing to build the city's reputation around this sector, jumping on existing programs again, which have been successful, like Advanced Queensland Knowledge Transfer Partnership, and continuing to build partnerships with organisations like Microsoft, Griffith University and Coders Dojo, which we've done this year.
And there's some sample vacancies that were highlighted throughout the workshops. The next one was the Biomedical Technologies. Over the past several years, the Gold Coast has experienced exponential growth in emerging industries. And one of the fastest growing emerging industry on the Gold Coast is the biomedical technology industry. Now, there are two segments to the Gold Coast emerging biotechnology industries. There's the pharmaceuticals and the biotechnology, which includes examples of, discovery and development of new drugs and new vaccines, and the medical technologies. Now, these include, for example, in vitro diagnostics and digital health. It's importantly, both these segments of the biomedical technology industry rely upon sophisticated supply chain that traverses a number of sectors, including Industry 4.0. The exponential growth of one technology segment enables that couldn't have been anticipated is in just 5 years. The exponential growth of one technology segment enables that couldn't have been anticipated just 5 years ago is that of clinical trials. And you'll see that clinical trials underpins the pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. It also underpins the medical technologies. No drop, sorry. The Gold Coast has the largest, I love this one. The Gold Coast is the largest regional city in the country for the delivery of clinical trials. It is experiencing growth of 32% at the moment. And the rate of growth over the next 5 years will far exceed the national average, in line with it being an emerging industry. All the direct jobs created are typically high-value knowledge jobs, and they contribute substantially to our economy. So each direct job generates a value add to the Gold Coast of over $150,000, and by 2029, the employment in clinical trials is expected to generate $33.1 million per year to the Gold Coast economy.
So, yeah, some of the issues, or not so much issues, but certainly opportunities, were around leveraging off the existing capability in the sector and potentially taking a longer-term strategy for the sector and positioning the city, not just nationally, but in APAC as a leader in biomedical. Part of that would also include establishing mentorships for people in leadership roles, not just within Australia, but again in APAC, and that's probably something we'll talk a little bit further with Chris in the next session.
Yep, definitely. Advanced manufacturing. This is exciting. It's exciting times on the Gold Coast. Advanced manufacturing, or manufacturing, is the third largest sector on the Gold Coast, and it contributes $2.7 billion in value add. And it's grown 22% over the last 5 years. It is exciting times to be in manufacturing on the Gold Coast. It has a total output of $8.3 billion, and in 2021, the Gold Coast had 2,860 businesses in manufacturing. And some 2.5 years ago, when I was talking about manufacturing on the Gold Coast, we had 14,000 in manufacturing employed. So it is a substantial growth industry. Yep, you can see all the figures, so I won't go through them.
Yeah, so again, definitely shortages in workforce being attracted to manufacturing, and that's definitely something we'll talk about with Shay in a second. And I think one of the critical parts there is that manufacturing not being seen as a career pathway. And I think one of the opportunities for us is to continue to build the relationship between the vocational education training sector and industry as well. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, space, aerospace and defence. Now, this is a pretty exciting field to be in. Our state's space industry already employs over 3,000 full-time equivalent positions. It generates $760 million per year through core industry services like satellite communications. Queensland has the capability and location to develop the space industry with the potential to contribute between $3.5 to $6 billion to the economy by 2036. $15 million have been invested in a new military space capabilities with Gilmore's Space Technology, and we'll be interested to hear Nick talk about that a bit later. Australian Space Agency and industries to develop the supply the sovereign space surveillance and mission system. Conservatively, Queensland defence industries employ more than 6,500 people. We can't get up the latest figures on this, but it generated an estimated $6.3 billion in revenue between 15 and 16.
So obviously space is a huge opportunity, and there's been some really big announcements recently about the Gold Coast playing a pretty significant role going forward. But again, as we're going to talk about in a minute, there are still difficulties in attracting people in certain roles, not just necessarily engineering roles, but general trade roles as well. One of the opportunities we're looking at here is if the city is going to play a big role in space manufacturing, is there an opportunity for TAFE and universities and to have bespoke programs focused on that as well?
Marine industry. The Gold Coast boating industry is estimated at $33 million. $11 million is currently being invested into the city's marine trades campus, and the city is headquarters to over 450 marine companies, and worldwide, again, we're punching above its weight. And the latest figures is the projection to 2025 of the marine industry says that total employment for the Gold Coast will be 3,380 people. The amazing amount of output value by 2025 will be $846 million. The value of exports for the Gold Coast is $460 million. Places like Maritima and Riviera have delivery time waits on some models of 3 to 5 years currently.
Yeah, and so this is a real problem for the sector. So that's restricting growth, restricting money getting out the door. We're in discussion with representatives from the marine sector. We identified about 20 to 30% shortfall, and I suppose opportunities around potentially encouraging other people into the sector. We had very low female representation currently, but again, like the manufacturing sector, there's the opportunity to highlight the career pathways, that there's all sorts of trade roles, there's design roles, and I think that's going to be one of the opportunities around that sector.
Yep. So, to summarise, our key issues are, Dan?
And so I think it's important to present this. At the start, we started with, well, what's gone on in the last year? It's been a pretty dynamic year, and I think that everything pointing forward is probably going to be another fairly interesting year. Looks like we've got rising wages, rising interest rates. We have these emerging sectors. We've also going to get a lot more domestic and international migration. So under these circumstances, the kinds of issues that we've identified is significant shortages in workforce. It's not just a Gold Coast issue, it's a national and a global issue in some cases. There's a lot of movement between different organisations, and that's because employees can move between, knowing that they can potentially get more money, and then there's opportunity for how we look at the career pathways and how we potentially represent those. One of the things I think that this is a really long-term thing and something that won't be solved overnight is the connection between industry and what's being taught. And it's a very difficult time for this to occur because of the advancement in technology. But I think it's something that the Gold Coast needs to try. And obviously, how do we continue to try and get underrepresented cohorts of people back into the workforce? And I think that that'll be a critical part as well as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the potential solutions, I think Dan's spoken to a number of them, is that tripartite relationship between the education sector, manufacturing and the schools or the students. It's about a lot of companies are now looking at internally upskilling, growing their own. Skill migrants, well, that's been well received. Integrated work learning has been an interesting one that has came out, and we've been discussing this with a number of universities. Micro-credentials was a big one that industry felt that may be a good way forward for them. The Gateway to Industry program, school industry mentoring, and Dharma, but that's going to be a long-term solution. and responding to increasing women in non-traditional industries. And I'd just like to do a bit of a shout out on this one. We have Amanda here, Amanda from Awesome Women in Construction. Amanda, if you just want to take a big stand up for us. Amanda is just amazing. So she's running the Awesome Women in Construction. It's about getting women into non-traditional roles, engineering, construction, all facets of construction. And next Thursday is launching a app for called Be Ready. Yes. Thank you. And that's working with high school students and females and giving them access to what that career could look like, who do they engage with, what do they need to study, what is the job role, does it fit them? So well done you. I can't wait to see that come out. Tech Girls and Coda, yeah, give her a hand. It's amazing. We've been working closely with Tech Girls, Coda Dojos, and for that I've been working with Suzanne Osborne. Suzanne, take a stand please, wherever you are. Suzanne's been absolutely phenomenal. She works with Griffith University and she's absolutely been running with this one. And we will be rolling out the Tech Girls with a local school in the third term. And this is about engaging young girls into the tech and IT world. It seems like young females start the world in school working in tech and IT, but by the time they get to high school, there's only a 10% stay rate on it. So we're now looking at trying to increase that and working through Tech Girls and Coda Dojos to do that. Makers Empire is another, thank you Suzanne, that's brilliant, thank you so much. Suzanne's also been responsible for us linking with Microsoft and to look at internships and look at some programs that we can run here. But also is Glenn English here? Yep. Okay, Glenn. I spoke with Glenn. He's running the Australian Industry Trade College. Thank you, Glenn, and we'll be working closely with you. That sounds like an amazing college as well. So there's been some positive outcomes in this project. Dan, future.
Sorry. So yeah, I think some of the future priorities, and the reason I highlighted is that we're going into a well, potentially, I suppose we don't know what's going on over the next year, but I think we can all agree there's probably going to be challenging potentially. So what we've tried to do is look at priorities that, regardless of the context or the climate that we're in, make sense. So I think one of the big ones is going to be how do we continue to market the city, both in terms of the great sectors that we have, but the great opportunities that we have for the workforce. As we said, continue to build better connections between industry and the training sector, encourage underrepresented cohorts back into the workforce. And continue to do what we can to support those sectors and promote the value of sectors doing great work on the Gold Coast. And I think obviously skilled migration has to be an enormous piece of the puzzle, and how we encourage people to come here and help us out.
And taking the story of the Gold Coast and making it the smart city, we are an incredible smart city. We have massive manufacturing industries. We have state-of-the-art buildings and organisations, and it's about now focusing the Gold Coast as being a smart city. And it's also about, especially it's about attraction, retention and growing our own, especially to our high school students. They don't actually realise that they can work on space programs, super yachts, Formula One racing cars, right here on the Gold Coast. So we now need to start talking that up, and we now need to start really working on a targeted approach with the high schools, with the universities, with the training organisations to really try and embed that into our students for the time moving forward. Thank you. And I think that's the end of our presentation. Yeah, thank you very much.